Hello dear friends of Philipp von Rosen Gallery. I have probably already said this a few times. I don't usually consider the early biography of artists to be that important that you have to spend a lot of time talking about it. That's why I usually only briefly discuss the stages of their academic training. In the case of Ignacio Uriarte, who was born in Krefeld in 1972, spent a long time of his artistic life in Berlin and now lives in Valencia, things are a little different. After graduating from high school, he didn't study art, but business administration. He studied a program with a practical element, which meant that he worked in the business world at an early stage. He has worked for medium-sized companies, such as a lubricant company in Guadalajara, Mexico, as well as large corporations such as Siemens. He has no formal training as an artist, nor has he graduated from an art academy. What can be mentioned, though, is that he spent 2 years studying audiovisual arts at the Centro de Artes Audiovisuales in Guadalajara. After a few years of working as a business economist, almost 20 years ago now, Uriarte lost interest in such jobs and decided to turn his hobby of creating art into a profession. He began to reflect his impressions and experiences from the world of work and bureaucracy, and, to put it simply, he began to deconstruct office materials of all kinds. In addition to photographs, videos, installations with sound or paper, and other office-related materials, he also created drawings with a variety of pens and typewriters. This explains the term office artist, with which he is often associated. We first showed Ignacio Uriarte in Berlin in 2012. With Rectangle, Triangle, Circle, we are now opening our 5th solo exhibition with the artist. In this exhibition, we are exclusively showing serial scribble drawings in a new muted color palette, which are divided into 3 chapters, respectively exhibition spaces, according to their basic geometric forms: rectangles, triangles, and circles. They are drawings made with a new type of fineliner that Uriarte has only recently discovered for himself. This fineliner series offers him 14 different colors, in addition to the standard office colors of red, green, blue, and black, which Uriarte has used up to now. He can now draw in shades such as Prussian blue, shades of gray, Bordeaux red, brown, and black. To a certain extent, Uriarte is departing from the office with its rather garish signaling colors and turning to an aesthetic that is controlled by him as an artist. However, the new color palette shows popular color choices for suits and costumes, and is thus again referencing the business world. It is not only the colors that have changed in the current scribble drawings, but also the type of overlapping and the creation of graphic spaces that we are not yet familiar with from Uriarte's work. Strictly speaking, he deals with the question of how, with the means of drawing, space can emerge or dissolve. He asks which geometric forms can be used to create space and how stable or dynamic can the space appear to the viewer as a result. It is not only the surfaces on which he worked in the drawings that play a role here, but also how the blank space in and around the forms is activated. Let me briefly touch on the technique of scribbling. While many of us occasionally doodle in the office because the meeting or conference call is boring and unproductive, Uriarte has developed a skill that no longer has anything directly to do with the world of the office. He can create dense, darker and looser, as well as lighter zones, as well as all intermediate states. He can create homogeneous and developing fields and, for example in the work Warm and Cold Waves, he can deal with color nuances that are so subtle that they can only be recognized at second glance and described. What he precisely does is subject to artistic compositional decisions. The drawings also contain references to the world of work and the structure of our lives. For example, the number of 12 circle segments that make up the formation in the circle. This is half of a day, the rhythm of which is structured by the clock. In semicircle propellers, too, you can make out typical temporal structuring elements. There are 6, 8, 10 and 12 semicircles. A different reference to the world of bureaucracy can be seen in the work Black Window Division. Here, the sheet is divided into numerous vertically aligned rectangles, which in turn are always divided diagonally, so that the upper left corner has been scribbled on, leaving the lower right corner free. And almost all recognizable rectangles have a DIN format. It starts with DIN A3, continues with A4, A5, A6, A7, and ends with A8. Apart from the fact that the systematic development is depicted here, Uriarte also creates a strong spatial effect and the effect of light. Overall, the sheet also reminds me of the facades of the Horton department stores, which are often mistakenly attributed to the German architect Egon Eiermann. Another example of the proximity to the world of work can be seen in the drawing Blue Square Ribbon Overlap. Here, Uriarte has divided the square format of the sheet into thirds vertically and horizontally. The resulting central square remains free, and this is another good example of the above-mentioned significance of the unworked surfaces, creating a form ex negativo, as it were. So, the blank central square has been defined by scribbling around it, more intensely on the inside, less so in the center. And then Uriarte mirrored these scribbles on the outside of the large square. The result is a form that appears three-dimensional, like a tube. This is reminiscent of the Austrian artist Peter Kogler and his tube systems. At the top right, however, the two stripes or ribbons seem to overlap, and another square the size of the central square is created. It appears flat and only shows a slight shimmer. This formation, and now I come back to the fact that there are other elements that are reminiscent of the world of work, makes viewers think of company logos. Dresdner Bank and Deutsche Bank come to mind quite explicitly. Compared to earlier works in Uriarte's oeuvre, the new drawings also contain playful moments that can be seen in the free use of geometry and the spaces created by overlapping, multiplying and dividing. One example of this is the work Vertigo. While Alfred Hitchcock's famous film of the same title is about the fear of falling into the depths, Uriarte's drawing allows us to be sucked into the central depth space. It is created by combining right-angled triangles that are staggered, reduced in size and rotated by 22.5 degrees each time to the right. This creates a square standing on its tips after 2 rotations, another orthogonally aligned square after a total of 4 rotations, and another square standing on its tip after 6 rotations. In the middle, an unscribbled field shimmers, which seems to draw us suggestively into the sheet. I have already mentioned the effects of light that Uriarte has created with his current drawings. They are created by the gradations and the multiplication or staggering of the scribbles. They repeatedly create spaces that allow the light to shimmer through. It seems, in fact, as if it was backlighting. A striking example of this is the diptych doors, which makes metaphors such as light at the end of the tunnel or the light leads us onto the right path plausible. The black arches and the red arches from the circle room also allow this kind of content-related, quasi-religious spiritual association. They are reminiscent of the thick columns of Romanesque crypts, medieval column capitals, or the abstract patterns found as wall decorations in Arab mosques. Or, for those who prefer nature to sacred spaces, plants in a jungle. Architectural vaults are also suggested by the gray semicircle diptych, where the semicircles are scribbled alternately in 2 barely distinguishable shades of gray, so that arches can be seen that seem to protrude forwards, while the semicircles in the semicircle propellers show the stars in the center with different numbers of rays and different lengths and sizes, and thus have a quasi-religious aspect. These semicircles also remind us of our positions in clocks, watermills or bucket wheel excavators, so that it can basically be said that there are new legible and interpretable forms in the drawings. This also applies to warm and cold waves and their organic forms, which are reminiscent of interlocking hands or the teeth of a zipper. Negative space also plays a major role here, and the history of psychedelic design, when you think of wallpaper, curtains or cover fabrics from the late 1960s and early 1970s. The shapes employed often become vehicles that serve to represent mathematical formulas and rules, which are frequently used in work processes to calculate budgets, working hours, payroll accounting, etc. Similar shapes are also frequently used by companies as symbols, be it as a company logo or an event poster or in a PowerPoint presentation for the simplified representation of company values or complex systems. We are now in the triangle room, where we see another work, Black Rhombuses, which, through the layering or alternation of scribbled and unscribbled zones, has a strong light effect and suggests that the form is embracing us or that we experience a form of enlightenment. The shape can be traced back to the Ojo de Dios, Eye of God, a spiritual votive object originating with the Huichol Indians in Mexico. This form appears in the Latin American abstract art of the 1960s, which Uriarte studied intensively. Finally, let me turn to the work Gradient Rhombus Diptych, because the shimmer, the effect of light that Uriarte has created here with the fine liner is so special. The two large rhombuses are each divided into 14 rhombuses and 2 triangles and scribbled in opposite directions, either starting from the horizontal lines or from the tips. If you imagine both sheets pushed on top of each other, you would either get a very dark or a very light sheet. What is decisive for us as viewers, however, is that spatial and light effects are achieved here that are almost impossible to define and grasp, and that confuse or inspire us accordingly. The exhibition runs until August 24, and we cordially invite you to visit. I wish you a wonderful summertime. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.